Oh, thanks for that. Okay. To kick us off, we're gonna be doing these on every 2 weeks, like Martha was saying. And what I want to go through today is the landing zone. And a lot of you joined after having had a landing zone. And what is it? What's the purpose of a landing zone? Where does it fit in? And sort of what sort of give you an example of what we've got in that space now. Then I want to go over to like these flows mindsets. We call it build kit flows. Flows are developer flows, things with a clear objective, what you want to do, and how the flows can, what our thinking is and what some of the new flows are that we, check this out. There we go. So is this presenting? There we go. Okay. And then if you talk about some of the things, the roadmap, and then I have a Q&A sort of going. Now you'll see in the part of the chat there is a Q&A functionality. So you could go into the little 9 dots at the bottom right and ask questions as they come up. And we'll sort of attend to them as we go through the session. Okay. Cool. So starting with the landing zone. A landing zone is effectively a very common thing in the cloud world where all these big providers have got landing zone guidelines and what do you need to put in place and what the policies and organizational structures and best practices are. That's what they often talk about, a landing zone. Now, you need a landing zone to build stuff. You need a landing zone to deploy things in. That landing zone ends up being quite an important piece because it ring fences all the organizational policies, regional restrictions, etc. A whole, hundreds of sort of policies that you can enable within your landing zone to ensure that your underlying technology actually operate within the bounds of your particular regulatory environments, etc. So what we've done in that space, and we'll jump onto a quick example of what we mean by that or what that looks like. Now, as I'm going to share this part. I'm going to share this. Okay, so what we have what we call like an initialization flow of landing zones. So how that works is your build partner will have the capability to generate or initialize what a landing zone should look like. And the very first part of the process is setting up the configuration. So in other words, what's the name, what's the default region, the org ID, the organizational ID that's unique across the entire platform. That we then generate a link that kind of looks like this, that you've got an initialization requested, means that we know what we need to do, but we can't do it on your behalf. And that's the crux here, is in order to actually act on this, we have basically action required prompt that says, okay, as an org admin, go into your org and run this particular script. The script will then set up all the goodies in a little folder that ring fences security and all the policies, and then give Alice Build access to that folder. And once that's in place, we can then provision the rest. So it's a very kind of tightly controlled folder architecture. So you can have one Google organization with many landing zones in it, as an example, kind of folder driven. So I'm going to go through just a quick, what that looks like is you sort of open up the cloud shell. And the idea is not to go through the detail, just to give you a feel. A landing zone is something that we can create quite quickly. So if there's other new clients or a new idea or new organizations involved, it's actually not a big deal. And James, you can chip in if you want from and we do that through the standard cloud shell scripts. So you can see this. I just got to sign in.
Yeah. While Jan's doing it, for those on the call that are doing kind of customer-facing work, if there's anyone who records it, we've done a lot of work to make it feel very comfortable to a security admin without them having to actually do much. And we've done kind of stress tested this with Microsoft 365 companies with existing Google Cloud estate, with no Google Cloud estate. And so it's a really seamless way for that end customer for you to work with that end customer so that you can get going actually building for them.
Cool. So you see the
TechBridge team, this is for you.
Yeah. So this is Baked Exchange. Is just a fictional sort of organization that does agentic baking, and you can see this particular profile is a completely, it's not an existing user on Build platform at all. It's completely isolated in its own profile. So what we do, we identify that person. That person needs to be an org admin. We tell what we're going to do, and then you say, cool, initialize. This part, what it does, for that particular organization, we just now start that process of, if you look at so this is what a typical Google org, for those who haven't seen, you have your org at the top, so Agulhas or Alice, or in this case Baked, and then we've got folders under there that actually does all this stuff. Now, this part of the execution is, if I refresh this, you should see this thing coming through. There we go, Baked 3 coming up. Okay, so Baked 3 is a new org, and that then takes you through the complete setup. Practically what happens, you all know, infrastructure as code is this big term. It's all Terraform driven. So it's just Terraform modules that are run in sequence, retried, made sure it's robust, that starts building up this organizational structure. Okay, so this depends on your setup. In this case, I said I need one Gemini Enterprise product. We configure the groups, and you'll see this thing now over time just evolves, which maps, you can see that, which maps exactly to what you see on the Google side. Okay, so it might be obvious for a lot of you, but that's the gig. Once it's done, I've got another one that's sort of, I've just completely, here we go, already set up. It kind of looks like this. So you've got the org at the top, organizational infrastructure, right at the top. That is effectively a folder in the client's customer Google account. Underneath that folder, there's in this case, a product. So each product, and you can see these squares are projects representing those products, because sometimes we need to store things. So you can see Gemini Enterprise, they've got a product, dev environment, prod environment. Again, if you look at the actual, just make it bigger. If you look at this, you can see that same structure is replicated. Okay. Now, once it's launched and ready, you get this sort of message basically saying, like, cool, either go and open those up in the Google Cloud Resource Manager, and that's what we've looked at. This is what you see here. So that structure that we've got here is replicated in folders in Google Hierarchy. We also have a Alice Build console that a lot of you are familiar with, but just to open that, it's the same structure, just with additional functionality and features. So again, you open at the top, organization, you'll see that project identifier. That project identifier is the exact same product identifier that you see there as a project. So it's like a one-to-one mapping. Again, Terraform says this is what we need in this structure. Okay. Product at the top, and then you move into the products. Each product has got environment, so you got that same hierarchy. Okay. So this Takes about 20 minutes in total, give or take what you set up. Once that's ready, once it's up, we give you then access points, because that's now moving into the next bit. You've got the products, you've got the organization, you've got everything set up. You now actually want to start building stuff. You actually want to build your first servers, or you actually deploy some stuff. We then provide entry points into these products, as an example. So if I go here, you'll see these open in IDE. This just literally just opens up VS Code in this case, and right into the IDE. I'll show what that looks like now. Cool, but I mean, conceptually quite simple. All products, deployments, part of the initialization process. You can add obviously more products as you go along, etc. So any questions? I think that's
And one thing to highlight for build partners, we'll have it in the partner portal that you can create those kind of pre-configured links for customers. We're happy to join those customer calls if you're doing the setup for them, but we've also set up so that you can do that directly with them, without having to always have Jan in a call. Although we all feel more comfortable when Jan's in the call. Jan or Daniel. It's just like the safety blanket of cloud infrastructure.
Cool. So the journey now is obviously we have now a place that we can put down code, and what now, like how, and and that's now the sort of diving into what the next flow is, like what we call build kit flows. Okay. So the build kit lives in a product. It lives in the context of that landing zone. So if that landing zone disappears, your code's gone. It's kind of quite a nice isolation framework. Nothing lives out of the landing zone of your particular deployment. That's quite important. So you'll see the latest version shipped this morning with VS Code. We've got enhanced build flows. Now, the crux of this is to enable, not to do it for you. That's quite an important piece, because if we put a button to do stuff, you never think about it. You never grow as a developer. You don't. We make it easy. We make it easy to sort of do fast and automate and quick, but we don't hide anything in terms of the actual infrastructure and the actual code. So code blocks and all these things that we have, if it's not transparent, it's not useful. It's not something so being curious, have an appetite to learn is key things, and will enable a lot of those things. So the mindset of a flow, and I'll take you through one or two now, is with achieving that it's sort of that the developer flow guys often talk about. You're just in this flow, it's just like things are just flowing. You're doing it. You've got agents helping you do it, but it's you in the flow mindset. That's sort of the idea behind these flows. So if I share just my I should have shortcuts to okay. Cool. So I clicked on that previous link, open in ID, and it opened up this particular window, which is already in that landing zone that we just created. Now, part of that, when you see this icon, that's the Alice Build icon. So look for that. There's some Easter eggs that we ship with this thing. There's anything useful, you'll just look for that logo. But the first part is you can see this on the left. Now I won't do a full-on intro on what this is all about. But the idea is you on day one you presented with the flow kit, the build kit with flows. And the idea is that this should take you through the steps of, okay, how does this work? How does, and we'll extend these and get, I think, feedback from the build community on what would be useful. What are things that you often do, or things that would be, what are code blocks that we often use? We have things like the identity, the user's code block, identity flow. Now, to do the first one is kind of, you need to, so we're really investing on making that easy, but not automated, if that makes sense, on day one. So looking at identity, and you'll find the similar pattern is you've got, let's make it slightly smaller. You've got these flows that it takes you through. So, you need a service. You either create one, select one where you want to put this thing down. For the identity, there are things that are important in this, without going into context. There's important things that you need to confirm. Who's the super admins? Jan might be super admin, etc. So you'll find the sort of inputs and then going into the details where install identity will be installing the code block. So a lot of the code blocks that we've been using in the past, the code block is a mechanism to help. It's not the thing that keeps the flow, if that makes sense. Run, define, open the configuration, set your client. So some of these things might be familiar, but the idea is that these things are kind of self-served, if that makes sense. Okay. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot with us. I don't want to, it's not a where do you stop, but the journey is just, we've got a landing zone, we've got products, we've got deployment, we've got environments that we can put code down. We can now go through this thing. A particular flow, build custom APIs would be quite a nice one to take you through the philosophy of define, build, deploy. What it is, what does it mean, why do we need it, kind of thing. Why are we thinking like this? Cool. And then you quick start. What does it do? So it tries to make it quite simple, very modular, with the objective of enabling and not doing it for you. That makes sense. Okay. So always, if there's feedback on flows or different type of things that would be useful, just communicate to the build team, and we can sort of flow enable. And the thing is, you might think that one thing, I've done it 4 times, it's easy. That's the trap. The trap is that it feels easy because it's just the one thing, but then tomorrow you've got another one. And next week you've got another one. So you then got 5 things, and you've got to always remember, if you don't do this stuff on a regular basis, you kind of forget, I've deployed this thing without, So the install, Madeleine, the install, your question around installing blocks, installing the users v1 block, which is the underlying identity, you can still go through that route. But there's sometimes just things to be aware of before you even start. So for the first person, you don't have to go through this, but if you install a code block, you need to go read the code block documentation and know what's the envs, what's the cookie, and the, there's URLs you need, and how to do things. What I find quite useful is actually the links are contextualized here. So if I click there, it knows where I'm at, it knows in the product, it knows everything. So this install actually installs the code block under the hood and does the merge. So it's just different levels of abstraction that we're trying to sort of facilitate. Okay. And there's things like, there's a specific file that you need to go and configure. Now, you don't always know that. You click, you go to that file, and it tells you what to do. There's Google clients that you need to create. You have to do this through the console. You click on it, it takes you to that thing. It tells you exactly what the values need to be, what the callbacks need to be, the authentication, etc. So it's just like kind of those copy-paste stuff that often, you deploy something, it's like, there's something missing, or you try and you did a typo. There's actually unnecessary toil introduced. Cool. So that's the concept of flows, to enable, not to sort of, yeah, basically to enable the builders. Talking about some of the flows that's coming, so there's we've got the for the launch pad, like these are all very dedicated. You can browse, look at what it's about. Particular ones that we're going to be focusing on is things like agents using the Go ADK, and we're pushing out a version today, tomorrow on that. MCP is already ready. It's still in private preview. But it's just those type of things that I think in the sort of agentic space is going to help builders just accelerate these things. So I mean, this is kind of now up to the build community what's useful. We can start adding those flows, if that makes sense. Files connected, for anybody who's used files exchange, that's this gig, that becomes configurable. Okay. So that's flows.
We've got some questions coming through in the Q&A. Might be a good time to quickly do those before we move on to the next section.
Yeah, so the agent stack, okay, so we've got a roadmap, and one of our biggest priorities is Google Agent Space, agent platform, the agentic stuff of this world. So we're focusing a lot on the Google ADK agent stack. We obviously, a lot of the services that we do are Golang based. We do believe you can do things in Python, etc. There's whole, it's not the point of the discussion, but having a robust, scalable, highly performant, especially if you start looking at armies of agents and agents speaking to each other, every millisecond counts, every startup time of every container matters, and Go is really well positioned for that sort of distributed compute mindset. So we've been zoning into and being quite actively involved in the Go ADK community, submit pull request and comment and issues, and because we think that, that is where we're going to be focusing for the next couple of months. There's obviously a lot of similarities between these different platforms, and for now the focus is like deep dive and really nail one particular one, as opposed to half nailing 5, if that makes sense. There's a big tailwind just being quite sort of involved in the Google ecosystem around this whole agent. All the building blocks of building agents, they make it really easier and easier and easier. So I don't know if it helps, if it answers the question. Yeah, I see it does, eh? There's like that little, So going back to the slide. So we've got the concept of flows is a step, hopefully quite robust step, and will improve as they go. But it's still steps that you got to follow. Do this and then this and then this. The whole, probably all of you have heard about skills. Everybody's like, skills is the next agent with skills is a thing that everybody is excited about, and we're seeing lift in building agents on that front as well. So it's real. So if you think about a flow, we are doing some work to think about how do we distribute build skills alongside these flows. And that actually talks to the question that just came up now. Because if you think about, the first time you're doing something is like, these are the define, build, deploy steps that you need to do. Make sure that you got the packages upgraded, etc. There's often like things that are once you've done it, becomes an embedded skill. That's like, cool, I've done it, so next, move on to the next stuff. But as these complexities just blows up, you can't keep all that stuff fresh in memory. So there's a sweet spot with these agents knowing the intent of what the builder is trying to do. It's got real-time access to thousands of skills using what they call front matter, just a description of when should you use this manual versus that one. And on demand, basically join the intent with the right skill and then take the user through it. So what we're going to be doing with these flows, because flows are a series of steps, a series of things that you need to do in a certain order. We'll have flow-enabled skills, which means that the next version of this is actually agentic steps. So your agent can take you through this thing, or you can go to the flow with the steps, or if you know what you're doing, you can just use the raw commands, build, deploy, all the stuff what you need. So the concept of skills is something that we are going to be focusing on a lot, to take over those. Okay, this is what happened. How do I fix this? Or which is different than documentation on the side, because documentation on the side is I need to go and find a matching doc for what I'm struggling with. Skills, actually, the agent will sort of form that link, which I think I'm quite excited about. I think the team. So it's skills across this thing. Yesterday there was actually a release with the Google I/O, the skills registry, where you can actually store and retrieve and have effectively a retrieval system, a RAG-based kind of Google search across skills to find the right skill and then read the skill. So it's a big deal. It's a big deal, and it kind of makes a lot of sense, because you want to almost have an open book test, have the whole library next to you, and then at the speed of light, just pick up the right book and do the right thing, put it down, and then move on to the next one. And that's how you learn. So that is something that we're going to be focusing a lot on. And what does it mean? Skills is, whether you use Claude or Gemini, all of these technologies have different ways of ingesting or accessing these skills. An agent has got like an internal folder. Gemini, you point to something, conventions. So it's the skills centrally plus the distribution of these skills that one's got to get right. Cool. And a bit about the roadmap. So the first we spoke about this skills and flows. It's kind of a natural fit. So Danielle is working on basically a builder agent that's got an awareness of that can actually run builds and deploys. We've got sort of working versions up in private preview, and adding skills to those tools means that you can start taking over some of these steps. So that's what we mean agentic build skills and flows. With that, as you'll see, one of the flows is an agent and MCP sort of flows, which is code blocks that we're seeing. Even things like Gemini Enterprise are starting, there's talks of supporting MCPs to these platforms. So you can imagine one of your clients have got Gemini Enterprise, you build a tool, an MCP, you give that MCP to Gemini Enterprise, and it's got capabilities, custom capabilities, super powerful combos if you think about that. The skills registry I mentioned, that's like how do you have a central source of bold skills and sort of distribute them as kind of documentation, replacement of docs sort of mindset. The fourth one is we're doing some work on just Git, overall Git. Because there's been requests things like pull requests and sort of more traditional flows that we're seeing more of. So Daniel's looking at that. Web interfaces, commenting. There's a couple of sort of open source things we're considering that we can potentially make available as part of the build. The other thing obviously with the landing zone, it's all contained. So not all organizations can just, okay, ship my stuff to GitHub, because the minute you do that, your actual business logic, everything leaves your landing zone, and it's kind of a big deal. So that's why the Git ecosystem needs to live in your landing zone. The backups, everything needs to live in that sort of cloud organization. A big pain point is code blocks. For those who are using it is fine, but contributing back to code blocks is non-trivial. So we are focusing on that piece to make that simpler, because it's been painful. Big mergers or big sort of contributions, it's quite messy. And then the agent platform, everything Go related on the agent platform. What's in the works this morning was actually Nicholas was talking about ADK Go, ADK Python 2 was sort of went GA, which introduced things like workflows, where you've got a mix of deterministic and probabilistic steps of an agent. So you want, in your world, so approval processes, you might have a very deterministic, if it's more than that, do this, if it's less than that, do this. Very deterministic, and then human in the loop points, approval steps, plus probabilistic, where the LLM makes a decision or recommendation on the outcome. So the workflows mindset is kind of a big deal in this agent. And Madeleine, for some of our clients, I think that's going to change the game with sort of agentic flows, because at the moment it's all probabilistic, really, if you think about it. It's generative. So that's probably the biggest thing. There is a branch on the ADK Go actively working on that every day. There's stuff happening in that space. So we should be experimenting with that pretty soon. Yeah. I think that was Martha. I don't know if it's...
Thanks, Jan. There's just a couple questions that have come through. And someone's asking if there's any consideration of technical documentation around the actual implementation of a flow, like what does define do under the hood, where are the artifacts stored, how is auth handled? So any docs around all of that will be made available.
Yeah, so you would see that the flow is like a construction of reusable pieces of the build platform. So probably the first flow that would be useful to look at is the let me share that, is the build the normal API flow, because it talks about under the hood what's happening when you run a define. This is the purpose of define. This is what's happening with define. And once you kind of go through one flow after the other, you realize, hang on, all the flows are using define because we care about definitions. So they're becoming these sort of familiar pillars, if that's the word. But the idea would be to start with a basic flow, and probably the first one to start with is the build custom APIs, which is this guy. This guy.
Okay.
And the intention of this flow is master the core build workflow define, like what's this all about? The 3 steps. And if you've got those 3 steps in your head, you'll see everything goes through that layer.
Okay. So essentially the docs are baked into the overviews of these flows, so people should be able to find them there.
That's right, and it actually it's the actions that you do. To give you an example, like if you run a define, the button in that flow, this button is the same button that you find in the define, wherever you want to run. So it's using the same commands in VS Code to do the same stuff. It's just duplicating. So for those who are familiar, you can see these DBDs, define, build, deploy. So if I want to define that service, I click on that, or I can click on this one. It's the same command. So VS Code works with these commands that are doing the same, and that's why it's not a separate documentation on a hello world like to do. It's actual real things. If you click on this, it's going to start initiating the define. You can see the define workflow, which if you know what to do is you can do that same one, or shortcut define, run define. It's the same command, just sort of string together differently. And the ideas with these flows should help you with getting familiar with these.
Yeah. Okay. And you spoke quite a bit about private preview, and there's a question around how people get access to that, or who is that available to right now?
I think private preview, you can reach out to Martha. Just there's 20 people on the call. It's the stuff. Private preview, it's agentic stuff. It's been challenging because the landscape is moving so fast. 6 months ago, there were no skill mindset. There's nothing. Go wasn't even around in the agent space, in the agent world. November last year, November, Go came out. So there's a lot of newness and a lot of stuff that's changing. So if you want to be part of that journey, by all means, reach out to Martha.
That's cool.
I'm also curious to learn just which IDEs and daily drivers people are using. So I'm just going to launch 2 polls there.
Yeah.
Curious to see those results. And then any questions, any requests, any frustrations, this is the forum. Anything that somebody would just like to see Newton do, because we all learn something when that happens.
While that's going, Jan, I just want to check if Johan's question around is it landing?
Yeah, regional. Yeah.
Yeah, the regions. Or what is possible to change actually once you've created the landing zone or not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so quite a key, like those are defaults. When you so defaults for your things like a spanner database. So there's the landing zone is flexible, but there's a cost flavor to that as well. For example, and probably the big one is Spanner. A Spanner instance will cost you at least $100 a month, $60 a month, $60 a month. But it's like you can do a lot with they have these so there's like a cost optimized flavor with the landing zone, so that you get robust infrastructure down that can scale like next level, but don't break the bank. Big Table is an expensive gig, Spanner, like all this. There's some architectural or some of these products, Google products, that we need to be careful of, or just, So when you look at the landing zone setup, you'll see a little Spanner database being created as part of your top level org. And in that org, all the products get their own dedicated database. So they've got a Spanner instance, what they call, and then databases. Now the instance needs to be in a certain region. And we put Terraform down that puts that in Africa South or Europe West 1. So the regional flavor of all these, let's call it like Alice managed Spanner. But remember, you've got Terraform that can deploy a Spanner. So you could, in your service, define a Spanner resource. And when you click on deploy, it will deploy a Spanner resource in Singapore if you want to. So you're not limited to that, but it's just the architectural decisions and defaults that we use when we do provide these infrastructure layers. You can't really changing region. You got to be careful. We don't allow that at the landing zone level because it's kind of a big deal where you put things sort of that first bit of architecture down. The other thing which is completely understated is communication within a region is petabyte scale. Communication between regions are millisecond scale. Like it takes. So you got to be there's got to be quite a good reason for splitting your regions up between your services. To give you an example, if your database is in South Africa and your cloud runners is in South Africa and you speak to each other, it's petabyte connections. It's the same data center. If the one moves to Europe, you go via the ocean, 200 milliseconds up and back. Comms. So,
That's good. Okay, Madeleine, that's a great question, and this is also what these type of forums actually become useful for. So if there's anything you want to deep dive into, I'd say send me an email or drop me a chat message. Let me know what things or what sort of topics you'd like to double click into, have a deep dive on, so that we can schedule them in consequent sessions. And this is open for everybody. Any other trailing questions for Jan? Anyone? The floor is open for 1 or 2 comments. Patrick?
Yeah, just decided to ask this verbally and to share our experiences. I think I just wanted to share on the point on, I'm the one who commented about the docs. Over the time we've been using ADIS, of course, we've experienced some breaks in the flows. Like recently, we were encountering an issue where you do the define, it does the go part, but when you go on the JavaScript part, it says that version is not yet ready. So we end up trying to figure out where are the artifacts, where are they stored? Is that version actually ready? Yes, the notification tells us it's there, but we are getting for, is it a 444? Yeah, 443. We're not finding. We go and check, oh, it's there. So there are times that the flow breaks, and that's why we've had to do a significant amount of in a way reverse engineering analysis on some different things. Maybe a build fails, maybe it's a Terraform issue, and we found ourselves just trying to demystify what Alice does, like how our ENV is actually stored. That is where we discovered the Terraform setting it on the Cloud Run. So I think at the end of it, the abstraction, sure, as you said, the abstraction is nice, but at times the abstraction does fail. And as you have encouraged Jan for us to grow and learn, we do need some insights behind the abstraction to know what's actually happening if something goes wrong. Yeah. So that was on that. My last one was also like onboarding new devs. Yeah, sometimes you have to just try and explain, and some of this we have to come up with our own internal documentation to explain like concepts. What is a product? What is a neuron? What is an org? Yeah, it would be nice to just give them a place to reference. Yeah, and the agent, I mean, the skills will be a great help. And honestly, we also are pretty excited about the skills and MCP. They will be of great help. I'd like to stop telling the agent to stop when you do define protos. Let me first generate the protos and then you can continue. So it will be pretty cool to have it. But yeah, thanks a lot. And I like the redesign of the platform. Pretty cool.
Thanks, Patrick.
Yeah.
That's just we've really struggled with documentation because documentation is always by definition out of date. For some of the onboarding and documentation, would you, if we put some of that behind some of these skills, tell me what's happening with define, because implicit in your question is you trying to figure out what went wrong. If we put some of that documentation combined with like how to debug certain things, would you use it within Claude Code or something else, or do you want something very explicit like a docs.ls.build?
I think the skills would be a great start. Of course, like later on, as the platform stabilizes, it would be a nice place to reference. But the skills is a good point, because again, at the end of the day, most of the time we do debugging together with AI. So and explanation with AI would be better. Yeah.
That's helpful.
That's helpful.
No, thank you. It's super useful. Yeah. I'm excited for the docs, skill version of the docs. 'Cause,
We've got time for one quick question. Just one. If anyone has got a burning question they'd love to surface here. No, all happy. Okay, great. Well, I mean, this is a great first start. And as you all know, you've got access to me. So if anything comes up along the way later on, please feel free to send me your questions or suggestions for topics we can cover. And then also to just put it out there, we don't just want the Alice team to kind of go on about everything we are doing. You guys are also building cool stuff outside of Alice. So we want to put an invitation out there that if you'd like to demo virtually anything about build to the rest of the community, this is the space to do it. So please send me a message about that. Quick 10-minute or so demo is always it's always welcome. So we encourage it. Let me know if you want to do that. And it doesn't have to be something super complex. It could be a best practice, a hack, how you're using AI or agents to solve some of your workflows. We'd love to learn from you as well. So please let us know. But other than that, thank you for your time. And we will see you in 2 weeks' time again. Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.